You're finally working, you're starting to make some money, and now you're starting to think about your financial future. And there's an ongoing debate whether you should be renting or buying. Short answer is you should be buying your first real estate deal. And we're going to go into the numbers where I'm going to show you how to make up to $150,000 on your first deal. So let's get into it. All right, so here's the numbers. We're going to break it down. You guys can see my Excel sheet here. And let's get some facts today, okay? 30% of the people out there, the average person, is living paycheck to paycheck right now, whether it be in the US or in Canada. And then on top of that 30%, you have people that have up to, that's a key word, up to $5,000 saved, meaning if they do have $5,000 saved, based on the average rent and the living expenses today, that's about 2 to 3 months worth of savings. And then they're also living paycheck to paycheck. So let's just get this straight. If you're at a point in your life where you're going to be able to either choose to be a sophisticated investor by renting or be a sophisticated investor by buying your first investment property, those are the two comparisons that we should be focusing on. I don't really care much about the bottom 60% because they got to figure out how they need to reduce their expenses and increase their income at the same time. It's a struggle with them. There's a lot of bad habits within these group of people. We'll address that later. But for now, for the people that are in a position to actually rent or buy, we should be comparing sophisticated renter to sophisticated real estate investor. Let's just understand that. Like those are the actual comparison I'm doing right now, okay? So someone that's equivalent to me who happens to be a sophisticated renter, they're not just buying a broad ETF or a broad mutual fund. They're expanding by doing some individual stock picks and everything like that, because based on my level of sophistication in the real estate market, that's who I'm comparing myself to someone else who is pretty much like a day trader, right? But if you were to take a risk on either day trading or doing what I'm doing, you can fumble on my side of the fence and you would still come out as a multimillionaire within 10 years. But as a day trader, it can go from being very good to very bad within a one trading session. So for the ones who are actually actively day trading, you guys know what I mean. But let's just bring it down a notch where, let's just say a renter might be putting all their discretionary income into a broad ETF versus a person that might be buying their first investment property and going with a long-term tenant like type of approach. So this is where we're going to be comparing, so you guys have an idea of what these numbers are. But yes, so understand that if you're at this point in your life and you're going to be choosing between renting or buying your first property, you're part of the top 10% because you need quite a bit of capital to save up. And it's not really easy saving up that kind of money, especially if the average income today up here in Ontario, Canada, is around $55,000 Canadian. After taxes and everything, that's $44,000 a year, which works out to be about $3,667 per month, if this makes sense, okay? The average one-bedroom rent up here in Toronto is around $1,800 to $2,000. You can find them cheaper, you can find them more, but we're gonna find it in the middle ground here between $1,800 to $2,000, okay? After that, let's ignore groceries and subscriptions and cell phone bills and everything. Let's just work with that your rent is your only expense, right? That means you have $1,867 of discretionary income to play with. So let's just say all this goes into the stock market, right? It goes into this broad ETF called VFV, right? It tracks the S&P 500 on the Canadian dollar side. So us Canadians up here, we're worried about the US dollar conversion. So they made a product or an ETF where it tracks the S&P 500, but the actual stock price itself is in Canadian dollars. So what I did was, because of my example, I invested with my two other partners in a triplex deal down in Cleveland. So that was in US dollars. We're going to see that on the next page, okay? But right now, initial investment of $170,000 buying into the VFV at the time we closed on the property. So if we're comparing same timeline, $170,000 into VFV on January 31st would give you like an actual stock price of $157. Okay, that was the average stock price. So it will give you a total of 1,082 shares. Okay, now because you have a discretionary income of 1867. I gave it to you guys that at the end of January, you're dumping another 12 shares. And then the month after that, because prices came down, you got another 12 shares. And then you're continuously averaging down and adding to your position. Now, the same timeline when we invest into the triplex, right? We closed on the 31st of January of this year, and we finally stabilized the entire property. It's fully rented out by the 1st of August. We actually got some tenants in on June, but just to make the comparison nice and easy, we're going to say that we actually stabilized the property on the 1st of August, okay? This is what your total investment here in terms of like the actual shares. You have a total portfolio size of 1182, okay? So the value is around $186,000, right? But you're averaging down. Your average price of holding this stock was $156.46 per share. But based on the closing price of Friday, which is, what was it, today is the August 29th, right? I don't know if, yeah, you guys can see it, but if you see on this side right here, it's $157.46. We're going based on real numbers today. It's no hypothetical. It's like we're not putting in a 7% return on the S&P 500. We're not doing that. We're doing as if you were to be investing into the real estate market today, or if you're buying into the S&P 500 today or sometime this year. That's what we're going to compare, because I don't like this idea of putting into the S&P 500 back in the 2000s and where your portfolio would have performed versus buying real estate in that same time period. It's hard to track. So I'm trying to get this out there by showing you a live example as close as I can get in terms of real time, which is I close on January, we stabilized on August 1st, and these are the numbers today, okay? So at the time of recording, this is August 31st. So let's break it down. As of today's numbers, August 31st, if you would have took your initial investment, put it into the S&P 500, the VFE ETF, you're sitting with a 0.6% return. So roughly 8 months. And your portfolio has performed at 0.6%. Now, a lot of you are going to say, that's not fair. You got to look at a long-term view and all that stuff. I'm like, cool. You might have 20% gains in a year. You might have 30% gains in a year, or you might suffer a 20% loss in a year. Who knows? So that's why I don't like using the average numbers of 0.7 or 7% return or 11% return, because it's not giving you realistic numbers. But by doing this, I'm showing you guys what I've been doing with the real estate side of things, why I believe that real estate is still a go-to asset class for the average person. We're going to show you the investor side, right? The real estate side. So these are the numbers on the investor side, okay? Same thing, average income, 55,000, right? Everything's the same. But let's just say I'm still paying rent, right? I'm paying rent up here because the strategy for us is that we can't afford Toronto real estate prices. Like the average door, if you were to buy one apartment, like a single family unit that's a 3-bedroom and 1 bathroom, it's $850,000 up here. So if you're trying to buy a triplex, like we're talking about just under $3 million for a triplex up here. We don't have that. Like the down payment on a $3 million property is 20% of that. And we do have a first-time home buyer program of 5%, but who's going to be able to finance the 95% off of $3 million? That's insane. So it's not going to work up here. So I decided that we're going to go down south, find a different market where it does meet our numbers. And look at this, okay? Now I converted to US dollars because we're operating US dollars. So understand that when I use the conversion into Canadian dollars, it's around 1.35%. So that's the conversion I'm using, okay? It averages it out. When we first started in the beginning of this year, the Canadian dollar was disgusting when it comes to the conversion. And now it has gotten a little bit better, but it's still bad. So our total investment, our initial investment in terms of buying this triplex, that includes the down payment, the closing cost, the carrying cost, and the rehab cost, this includes the balloon, like the over budget of the rehab. Our total investment is $126,000 US, okay? The triplex that we purchased at the time was actually $160,000, but we got a $5,000 credit because of the electrical issues that we had to address right away. So we got that $5,000 as a credit at the time of closing. Okay. Yeah. So you see the rehab cost of 73,000. So this 73,000 is not on top of the 126. It's part of the 126. Okay. And we got a mortgage of about $112,000 US. All right. So based on our projection and based on what we were analyzing the market, our carrying cost, we were just like, we don't know the actual utility costs and everything. So we're ballparking a lot of these things, including the property insurance and taxes, is around $2,450 a month. And our rent that's fully stabilized as the 1st of August, we're collecting $3,758. Okay. So that gives us a net income of $1,308. Now, if you can see on this side here, that $1,308 is still factoring in a 20% reserve fund. So that means 20% of this 3,758 is actually going towards maintenance, CapEx, like capital expenditures for one-time like fixes like the roof, the gutters, the furnaces, anything that's a capital expenditure. And then we have 5% for maintenance. So 10% for vacancy, 5% for maintenance, 5% for CapEx. So that's about 20% that's gone towards putting as a reserve fund overall. So even with that 20% being deducted, we're still netting 1308 US, okay? Which is, so based on a $126,000 investment, that's a just under $16,000 a year in terms of a return, or a 12.4% cash on cash return. So this is what this represents, okay? Not bad, right? Now, these are the little advantages when you're going into real estate, okay? You get to deal with the appreciation value, right? So after you renovate a property, the value automatically goes up. You can do a cash out refinance, which we're in the process right now. So the property went from $160,000, and with the total rehab and the renovations we've done on this property, we brought it up to a certain standard. The appraiser from the bank, we didn't order it ourselves. We went to the lender that sent out their own appraiser. So they're going to be using those numbers. So whatever they're coming back to us, that's going to be based, like the valuation or the mortgage is going to be based on that valuation. It came back at 294. That's a massive monster jump from buying a property from January of this year, 2025, to doing the appraisal at the end of July of the same year. So about 7 months, we forced the appreciation from 160 to 294. Okay. Now, since we're foreign nationals, we're Canadian. You know, if you're a Canadian investor, you're up here, you can refinance up to 80% of the value of the property into a loan or into a mortgage loan. But in the US, we're capped at 65%. There's some lenders that will do up to 75%. Those are rare. It's hard. There's 4,500 lenders in the US. Eventually, I'll connect with these guys. But for now, we have to work with 65% loan to value. So this is what represents. This number represents. So if we refinance, the bank is going to give us $191,000. But this $191,000 has to pay out the original loan, which is $112,000. So after all that, we're going to be netting $74,000. It's actually higher, but I minused more closing cost and title searches and everything. So I pretty much took off about $4,000, $4,000 or $5,000 off of this. So we're going to be like a capital return of $74,000. So $74,000 is coming back into our pockets, okay? So out of that $126,000 that we initially invested, $74,000 is coming back into our pockets. And that means we have $52,000 locked up in this triplex right now, okay? So that's our investment. So just follow me here, okay? We have $74,000 back in our pockets. We can do whatever we want with it. We left $52,000 there because of the limitation of doing a cash out refinance, right? So if you go based on this, our new cash flow overview, like our whole new picture here, is now our monthly carrying cost goes to $3,031 because the mortgage payment is actually higher, okay? even with the net income with the 20% reserve fund. So 20% of that rent is going towards CapEx, maintenance fees, and 10% vacancy. We're going to be cash flowing $351 a month. Now, that's a scary number, especially on a triplex. It's not a lot of wiggle room. That's fine, because by next year, these rents are going to jump. Because if you look at the bottom, a 4-bedroom goes for $1,400. A 2-bedroom, this is like equivalent to low-income housing type of products we have up here in Toronto. But the government there is subsidizing these people for the rent. I like these 2 units, the 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom, because those rent increases are automatic. The property management says that they're just going to be submitting a automatic rent increase, and the federal government doesn't even argue with it. They go based on a percent, and it goes up, and it doesn't come out of the actual tenant's pockets and everything. Everyone's happy, right? So anyways, our current cash flow situation, once we do the cash out refinance, we're sitting at $351 in terms of a cash flow. Okay. Now, cash on cash return, if you see the next one, is we'll be making $4,212 a year over a $52,000 investment, which means that gives us a 8% return, like a cash on cash return annually. Okay. If it's confusing, pause it and then just replay this, because I need you guys to understand why real estate investing, choosing it over renting and investing to the stock market, is still a better choice, especially when the stock market is at an all-time high right now. It's hitting all-time highs. And when it hits those all-time highs, we're going into uncharted territories when it comes to this. And the real estate prices I'm talking about here, yes, for where it's at, this is like the average price. The Cleveland market hasn't really hit an all-time high or a ceiling price yet, because LeBron James happened to spike the real estate market. And then when LeBron James left, the real estate market crashed. So anyways, let me keep on breaking it down here, okay? If we go with a 5% annual appreciation on real estate, that's very low. That's extremely low. But let's say we're going with 5%, and because the triplex has a new valuation of $294, that's going to give us a $14,700 of capital appreciation on our portfolio, okay? And that would represent a 28.3% potential profit on the $52,000 investment, because $74,000 of that came back to us. We can do whatever we want with it, okay? Now, based on today's valuation of $294, we forced the new equity, or forced the appreciation on this property after all the $126,000 fees and everything. And if we do the cash or refinance, it doesn't matter. We have an equity of $51,000 right now. That's like you buying into NVIDIA right now. You discuss with the executive board and all this of like future plans, and boom, the stock automatically went up after your discussion. That's something similar to here. When you went in, you fixed up the place and everything, and you brought it up to the actual book value where it's supposed to be. We're at $51,000 of equity built in. That would represent a 98% return on $52,000, or a 40% return if you're going to factor in that we invested $126,000. However you view it, it's still crushing the S&P 500 right now. Okay, it doesn't matter. Now, our exit, this is the difference, because a lot of you guys are just blindly investing into a broad ETF, especially the S&P 500. You're pretty much going to leave it in there for the next 30 years, or until the day you retire. That's the strategy on that side. But for us, our exit plan is if this triplex hits $525,000, which is around $175,000 per door, which gives us a additional return on top of the $51,000 of $231,000. So that will give us a total return on our investment of 452% on the $52,000 investment as of today. And we might get this $525,000 price tag within the next 5 years, right? If you're going to tell me that by you investing into the S&P 500 right now, that in the next 5 years, the S&P 500 is going to go up 452%, you're out of your mind. That's asking for Apple to go 4x, which is what? $3 trillion to $12 trillion. That's asking NVIDIA today at 4.2 trillion to go to 16 trillion or 17 trillion. That is what you're essentially asking the S&P 500 to do for you when it comes to, in comparison to what we're doing here in the real estate game. Okay. But I gave another breakdown here. Let's just say that if you want to compare a real case scenario where you're house hacking. So for all of you guys don't know what house hacking is, it's a popular strategy right now for people to get into the real estate market where you buy a duplex, you buy a triplex, you live in one, you rent out the rest. Some other people take a single family home and they convert a floor, 2 floors, even the basement into a unit, and then they start generating some rental income to help offset some of the carrying costs. That's what essentially what house hacking is. Let's just say that I decide to go with house hacking, right? Which means I don't pay $1,800 to $2,000 up here in rent in Toronto. I actually drive down to Cleveland and I live there in one of the units, which is going to be a 1-bedroom unit. So I'm losing this rental income and I'm basing my carrying cost and my net income based off of the 4-bedroom, right? And the 2-bedroom. After all of that and everything, what comes out of pocket for me every single month would be $678 to pay for this investment. But if I'm making $55,000 a year, which my discretionary income was around 1867, same thing like the renter here, 1867, based on Canadian dollars, right? I'll just have under $1,000 to pretty much invest somewhere else, right? I can start mimicking exactly what the renter is doing, which is buying an ETF, the S&P 500 ETF, while still maintaining my triplex here. So I'm gaining on the capital appreciation on the real estate. I have a lower, sorry. No, let me backtrack here. It's actually not $1,000 because I'm house hacking. Like it's going to cost me $915 out of pocket in Canadian. It's actually off of $3,667, which means my discretionary income after my housing expense and everything is going to be a lot higher compared to the renter in this situation, which means I can play catch up a lot faster if I want to dip into the S&P 500 or the overall stock market gains there, while also gaining on the real estate side, which means I'm more diversified than the average renter who chooses just to focus on purely a stock portfolio. So hopefully this clears up the debate. This is real numbers right now, legit. We got into this property at the end of January of this year, 2025, through the hoops and hurdles and all the ups and downs of dealing with the rehab and getting the rental units registered with the city and everything, all those headaches and all that stuff. Because you're going to hear it, that people saying, I don't want to be a landlord, or I don't want to deal with the headaches with a landlord. That's why there's property management in place. I don't want to start renting out or finding tenants and everything. Again, that's what property managements are for. There's a lot of tax advantages when it comes to owning real estate. But for us foreign nationals up here, I'm still navigating through in terms of what is going to be a good thing in terms of how to structure our taxes up here. But again, it's still worth it for me, right? So if you guys have questions or if you have any comments about what I'm doing right now, or if you guys just want to follow along and see what our next deal is, because our next deal, I'm in the negotiation right now, trying to get this other property under contract, because like I said, we're taking out $74,000 back out. And we're going to try and take the $74,000 to lock up another triplex, which means with the same initial $126,000, if I'm putting it into another triplex deal, that means we own 2 properties, 6 apartments, or 6 doors for the same investment. And if it's the same type of valuation, 294, appreciating at 5% per year, instead of being 14,700, it'll be almost 30 grand of capital appreciation every single year for the same investment amount, because we're leveraged on this side. I would rather be leveraged on real estate than to leverage my stock portfolio by using margin, right? A lot of you guys don't know what margin is on the stock portfolio side, but if you have, let's just say $100,000 of the S&P 500 ETF, I don't know the actual numbers, but I think it was 20% of the valuation of that portfolio. Let's just say it's 100,000. You can borrow another $20,000 and buy more of the S&P 500 stock itself. Now, there's a lot of high risk because you can get margin called if it goes below a certain threshold, and your brokerage account is going to demand you to fund the account or sell off some of your shares in order to settle that margin call. But here, we're leveraging real estate by, like I'm doing here, I'm pulling out the money, borrowing more money against the asset, and buying more real estate. The difference is that we are banking on the rental income. We're not buying single family homes where it takes one tenant to ruin or make that investment go bad. We're spreading it amongst 3 other tenants on the same property. So even if we're vacant and we're like only occupy 2 or 3 units throughout the whole entire year, some people go, some people like move early, whatever, at least our carrying costs will be covered for the most of the year, if that makes sense. So anyways, I've been talking too much and everything. If you guys like this, you guys want to follow along, you guys know what to do, just comment, subscribe, follow, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.